again. Welcome to another edition of Northern Spotlights with me, Terry McStea. It's good to see you again. And today I'm delighted to welcome my guest, Alfie Joey.
Yes, I'm Alfie Joey, an event host. I'm an MC at lots of events. Many years I worked on the BBC, and before that I trained to be a monk and was a trainee priest. We've all got a backstory, and that's part of mine. Thanks for having me.
Thanks Alfie. Because I did struggle to kind of sum up what you are, but that's what we're going to find out about. So we're here on a beautiful sunny day in June in Sunderland, which doesn't happen very often. Where's your favourite place to be in the northeast on a sunny day like this?
On a sunny day, well, I'll be honest, Terry, I'm a bit weird. As a kid, when it was sunny like this, my favourite place was in a dark room watching the snooker. I'm a freckly lad. I was a ginger lad when I was younger, so I've never been a sun worshipper. If we go abroad every now and again with the kids and the family, I always go, please, somewhere, not solid beach, solid, but it's got to have a little town where you can pot around dark streets. Yeah. So even on a sunny day like this, you'll probably find me in the darkest part of a coffee shop.
I'm with you on that actually on the holidays thing. I think lying on a beach for a week is just
my idea of purgatory. Yeah, I need somewhere where I can jot things down or draw some pictures, and you can't do that lying on sand. Yeah,
and is that something you just kind of do pretty much all the time? You always got a pen and a.
I do. I never go anywhere without my sketch pad, and I always try and theme them. So I used to have scraps and loads of books with unfinished bits and pieces. So I've now got a themed one. So I've got one I'll take in coffee shops and I'll draw people who meet, or I'll draw them on the bus. And my kids go, Dad, stop it! They can see you. You've given them a big nose, but I enjoy it, and they secretly like that as well.
I was going to say, do they quite like? Well, I'm sure they do. Having someone draw them.
Well. Funny enough, when we last went on holiday, I just kept drawing. We'd be somewhere, we'd stop for a sandwich, I'd get the book out and I'd just sketch somebody in the coffee shop or on a subway system or something and draw a spire. And I filled a sketchbook. Yeah. And when we got back a couple of weeks later, I went, have a look at that. And they looked through it and went, oh, there was that. Yeah. Oh, there was that. And it's a different way of remembering it rather than photos on your phone now. Yeah.
Brilliant. So we'll start at the beginning. So you were born in Peterlee, is that right? Not far.
A hospital, I don't even know if it's there anymore, Thorpe Hospital near Peterlee. Okay. But my first home was a workmen's club, Thornley Workmen's Club.
Oh, really? Right.
Which was the old, it's still there. It's a massive old building where they had a huge concert room. My mum and dad were stewards, very young stewards really, and I don't think they knew what they were doing. It's a big operation running a big club like that. Yeah. And this is when they were huge. Yeah. And you had TV acts coming round doing the club circuit. I think Paul Daniels and Tommy Cooper and people like that did a turn there. Rosemary, my head is in a spin, my doo-doo. People like that who you heard in the charts were still doing clubs. They were so big and they paid so well. My dad was a coal miner, but he just took this little time out to attempt running a club, and that was my first home. Right.
So you lived in the.
We had a little flat downstairs, and I think the concert room was above it. So I couldn't remember it, but people used to say to me, you were like Mike Yarwood, you used to get up on stage during the day when the cleaners were sort of getting everything ready, and I'd be playing with a mic doing Tom Jones and different impressions. I was doing impressions before I knew what they were, you know.
You could speak like someone else before you could speak.
Yes, I was and from a very young, I would enter any talent contest at school. I just loved being on stage from when I can remember.
Do you think that would have happened anyway? I mean, I'm sure living above a nightclub or a club would help, but do you think that would have happened?
Well, my dad loved entertainment. So my dad he was like the perfect DVD commentary. When we watched telly, on the couch with my dad, and whatever we were watching, whether it was light entertainment, whether it was old movies, classic movies, my dad was my guide. He'd go, he's a great actor. Watch what he's doing here. Oh, this singer's good. Yeah. Listen to this. Yeah. And he shone the spotlight in the right way. He was educating me, and it was brilliant. And I that was the perfect upbringing for me. That was as good as it got. I loved that.
Yeah. Wow. So you're probably always going to end up in that world.
Well, no, because when I was growing up, that was Fantasyland. Those people on telly. I wanted to do all those things,
right?
But it was never.
Really?
I never thought it was a possibility. Right. So as a kid, I listened to lots of radio. My mum loved the radio, and I thought, wouldn't it be great to have a radio show? And I watched people like Opportunity Knocks. We watched all those talent shows, New Faces. Yeah. I thought, wow, imagine being but that will never happen. That'll never happen to somebody from a pit village. Yeah. That only happens to different people who are not from places like this. Yeah. And then years later, I ended up with a radio show on Britain's Got Talent. So never in my wildest dreams did I think it would happen.
Right. It's interesting because some people we've had as guests have kind of, because they were in that environment, it was normal for them. So they kind of, it wasn't something that they never thought would happen. Whereas others, like yourself, they would see something. They would see something on the TV, or they'd see a career and think, yeah, that would be amazing, but that's not something I could ever do. I'm not sure what the difference is between those who think they can do it and those who.
Yeah, I think I probably lacked a bit of, and still do in some ways, a bit of killer ego. A lot of the people who have been around who made it big, or have done exceptionally well, and done much better than me, who I did know very well, just had this killer desire, and they would they'd kill their grandma to be famous, and I just never quite had that. I was always just happy to be involved. The same as when I got into comedy, I'm more than happy to just be the compere and not be the steal the show as the headline act. Maybe I wasn't as good as them, but I never wanted to be. I never had that burning desire. I was just happy to be involved.
So you found the level that you were...
Yeah, all the way. And I've only thought of this recently. I can't remember which conversation it came up in, but I've always sort of held back. I shared an agent with Mickey Flanagan and... Greg from Taskmaster, and he was going, go on, you should be having a go at Have I Got News for You and stuff like that. And I went, oh no, that's not for me. I'm more than happy at this level. And then when I ended up on the radio, I can remember myself and Charlie Charlton, who was my co-host on BBC Newcastle Radio Breakfast Show. We went down to watch 5 Live go out, and afterwards in the meeting, Charlie was brilliant. She was dynamic, and she was chatting in the after show meeting with all these people in London, and I'm just shrinking. I'm going quiet, going, I don't belong in this world. I'm quite happy with, and she ended up on 5 Live and doing national stuff, whereas I've always, maybe it's an inferiority complex or a imposter syndrome thing, but...
Or maybe you didn't want to have that killer
possibly,
ego to do all those things.
Well, I do know a lot of people who do go so far, a lot further. It can cause a lot of trouble, and it can cause it can cost you a lot.
Yeah.
You can make a lot,
but it can cost you a lot of your life, I think, don't you?
You do.
Yeah. So I think you've probably made the right choice.
Well, yeah.
So this is going back to this is you.
What a looker!
That's a smash.
How about that?
We've all got photos.
I've kept the image. I haven't sold out.
Well, exactly. Yeah. So how old were you there? About 10 or 11?
I think so, yeah. I think that's Peter. That's my uniform from Peter Lee, comprehensive.
So I've been secondary school.
Yes, yeah. With lovely ginger wig, and just like a Groucho Marx kit. I took the glasses off and the hair came with it, and so very, very strange. Looking back, I don't look back an awful lot,
Really?
I don't know. So you asked me to go through some old pictures, and it's always quite nice to look back. Yeah. But I'm always looking forward and always looking for what's next rather than looking back. And I don't go back a lot to places where I've been or where I worked, or not very often.
Right.
I don't know why. Maybe it's just
looking forward.
Yeah, there's too much to do.
Yeah. So you mentioned that when you were younger in the club and on the stage and doing impressions and things, were you still like that at that sort of age when you were sort of?
I've always enjoyed performing. Always, any chance or possibility to perform.
You'll be there.
I'll be there. And I can remember the school I went to after that was trained to be a priest. And I'd always been on stage. I'd entered every talent show. The first talent show I entered, I came last. And it didn't put me off. Right. I sang, and I didn't know it was a rude song, but do you remember Chuck Berry had a song called My Ding-a-Ling?
Yep.
I thought it was an innocent song about a little bell.
I think we all did when we saw it on Top of the Pops.
Well, I did. Years later, you listen to the words and it's filthy. When I didn't know it, and all the teachers were laughing their heads off at me singing, I want you to play with my ding-a-ling. And so I'm thinking, I've got a good chance here. The teachers are all laughing. They went, you joined last. I think, but they were laughing. Yeah. And then years later, I was thinking, what on earth was I thinking? So I would just go on stage. Nothing deterred me. A bad performance or whatever, I just soldiered on. And I remember going for a part in a play when I started trying to be a priest. I thought, I stand a chance here because I can do accents, I can, and I did all these different voices for different parts, and I didn't get a part. And I went to every rehearsal to watch. I said, is it okay if I still come watch the rehearsals? And then somebody dropped out. Right. And they went, you can have their part. Right. So, I was never deterred. I would just do anything to perform. But it doesn't
sound like you had a particular plan in mind. You just wanted to be there on a stage, entertaining people that didn't really mind what that led to.
Absolutely. And I probably, again, this is only in reflection, I was just always happy to be involved. I didn't need the main part. I didn't need the biggest cheer or anything, just to be involved. That was my thing. And I think it still is in a way. I'm in pantomime now, and I'm not the main. I'm not even best supporting actor. I just come on a couple of times, and it's great fun. I love it. And there's no pressure, I suppose. Maybe it's the pressure I don't like.
But I imagine the person with the smallest part in pantomime still has a great time.
Oh, it's brilliant! It's still hard work. It's still pretty relentless. You've got to be there for it all, and you've got to be on your game for it all, and you don't let anyone down. It's a big team thing. But I've always just liked being part of an ensemble, and that I think has slowed me down, because I was, again, looking back, when I got into comedy's quite a solo pursuit. But I kept joining sketch groups and collaborations, and we'd put on a team gang show and stuff like that, and we were producing loads of material, but it wasn't for me, it was just for the group. And a lot of it was topical, so that all ends up in the bin. Right. So I do sometimes think back and think, if I'd selfishly not been part of those groups, and I'd just written for me during those 5 or 6 key years when I just sort of breaking through, what might have happened. But you know what? I loved it. I enjoyed it. And I enjoyed the people I worked with. So,
and you might not have enjoyed it if you had gone in that direction. So you mentioned, so that was you at school, having a great time.
I keep jumping backwards and forwards.
No,
I've got a TARDIS.
I'll try and keep this in line. And then you decided that you wanted to become a priest.
I did.
So what sort of age was that?
Well, I decided when I was about 7.
Really?
Because a teacher, Mrs. Darby, who died recently, and she was the first person who encouraged me to draw, really. Right. She said, draw in your book a picture of what you want to be when you grow up. Right. Classic junior school sort of session. And most people drew, doctors, nurses, cowboys, whatever, astronauts. And I drew a priest. Really? And she said, are you sure? And then my headmaster got wind of this. He was brilliant. He was always so supportive of me, Mr. Smith. And they kept asking, do you still want to be a priest? It got round because it was a bit different. That was it. Most people kept double checking. Are you sure? Is that still what you want to be? And then somebody I knew went off to train to be a priest. Okay. It was the teacher's son, Mrs. Hudson's son. Right. And so I thought, I want to do that. And my headmaster and my parish priest both said, we think it'd be best if you went to comprehensive school first, did a bit of time there. Right. And after a few years, they checked in, went, do you still want this? And I said, I do. And it was a bit like Billy Elliot. My dad was a coal miner, and he couldn't understand it. You know, he couldn't talk about it. He couldn't.
Really?
And the night before I went away, he just broke down and cried and cried and cried, you know, for just all night, just saying, if you want to come home, come home. Because it was a boarding school, you know, you had to go away from home, another part of the country. He's down in
what
Wigan.
was it you were so kind of worried about, do you think, or concerned about?
Well, I think he cried because he couldn't articulate anything about what I was doing because it was alien to him.
Right.
He just, but it was one of the most important nights of my life, really, because he gave me permission to do what I wanted. Yeah. And he said, if you want to come home, you come home. Yeah. You just say the word, and we'll come and get you. There's no pressure on you. Whatever you do, we support. My mum's exactly the same, always has been. Yeah. I've made some wacky decisions and twists and turns, and they both, you know, were brought up in council houses and very sort of working class background, and they've just always said, whatever you do, as long as you're happy. Yeah. And that, just that simplicity has just given me so much solid support and foundations. That I've always just been able to do what I want to do with great confidence, knowing that they'll go, if you change your mind, we'll still be with you. Yeah. How good's that? That's great. Yeah. And other people I know growing up didn't have that.
Yeah, I think
not pressure or you must do this or we'll think less of you if you do that. Yeah. They weren't. They were just always, and my mum still is brilliant. Yeah.
So what age were you when you did?
So I was about 13, 14, went away to this Hogwarts for little priest wizards.
And that must have been really scary though. I mean, or were you just so excited to be doing it?
I was excited. And in a way, when I was at comprehensive school, this big, massive school in Peterlee, they asked me to go back recently to do a prize giving. Right. And they said, we'd just like you to share some memories of when you were here. Okay. And I had none. None. Right. I mean, I remember my mates. Yeah. I remember some of the teachers, but nothing happened. Right. I was just invisible. Right. I was absolutely, you know, that character in Chicken, Mr. Cellophane, Mr. Cellophane. I didn't stand out in any way. Right. I was just completely invisible. Right. So I tried to get in the football team, I tried to get in drama, nothing happened. Right. And I was always very enthusiastic, but just years went by and I can't remember. I just remember looking out the window and not being very good at studies or anything. I just, you know, I would have disappeared without trace when I left because I just didn't leave any imprint or mark on that place. Right. So
and it didn't leave much of a mark on you either.
Well, no, but it wasn't horrible. You know, it was just school, and I didn't dread going in, but I just can't remember enough about it. When I went to this place, and suddenly I was doing the drama, I was in the football team, I was getting, you know, I'd never seen a theatre show before. They took us to see a stage show and stuff like that. You know, we never went to the theatre as kids, and suddenly I was getting these different opportunities and different things would happen. There was a bit of a clash of cultures. Because I wasn't from some of the backgrounds of some of the other people there, but it was I was, you know, I miss me mum and dad, and my brother and sister, but there was so much to do and get my teeth into because suddenly I was heard, I suppose, and I was doing stuff that I'd always wanted to do. Yeah.
So that was Ushaw College, is that right?
No, there was one. The junior seminary was Up Holland College near Wigan, right. And after that. I went to Usher College, so I was junior seminary for 5 years, and then I went to senior seminary for 5 years. Right. So
So you went from kind of not really doing anything, and not being noticed, to all of a sudden a whole different.
Yeah, being creative and world. Very, you know, my art went suddenly better, and you know, I had a good art teacher, and scraped an A level in art and. Stuff. So I remember enjoying lots of things about that.
So how different was it in terms of, you know, the actual what you were actually doing at that school compared to what you would have been doing at your comprehensive? So it was kind of a fairly standard education, but with
God,
the other stuff, the priest stuff. On top.
Well, because you got up early in the morning. and you had morning prayers and then mass. That was all part of every day.
Right.
And then you'd have, you know, meals together, but it was always with prayers and things, and there was evening prayers and all church-based and stuff like that. And so that was obviously what you were training for. That was what you wanted to do, you know. Yeah. But I was always very, I suppose, a bit of a maverick. I always wanted things to be more entertaining. I always wanted, even when it was, you're in charge of doing the readings this week, right. I'd want to make it a bit different or a bit odd.
Jazz it up a bit.
Yeah. And when I went to senior seminary, and then I left there to train to be I joined a religious order. Another twist and turn. But we went there and we were with all these monks and nuns from other religious orders. We did a course. And I can remember being frustrated by people just going, a reading from St. Paul's letter to the Corinthians. Right. And I was thinking, did he write that for it to be read out like that? I doubt it. So I would literally, I remember finding a mac and a trilby in a cupboard and getting a trumpet and running into the room going, ladies and gentlemen, and people were like going, what? And it was too much. But it was enjoyable for me to do, just as an experiment. What else can we do with this? Because it's dead boring otherwise.
Yeah. And how did that go down? Were you allowed to do it again?
Yes. Oh yeah. They always expected something a bit different if I was in charge of doing stuff like that. There was another time I was using a puppet to do stuff, and I was always trying to think of a creative way to do something a bit different. And obviously, there's always people who don't like what you do. Yeah. And in this case, I suppose in the church, there were lots of very conservative people. Yeah. And I wasn't one of those. There was, you know, some people wore all the stuff and collars and very Roman collars and cassocks. And I was always... I remember my dad brought us a donkey jacket back from the pit, and I wore a donkey jacket in church. And that, you know, catching the eye. Because I was always still very proud and very... Because the miners' strike was going on when I was away. Yeah. So that was, again, Billy Elliot. I watched that film, I cried my eyes out because there was so many similarities and overlaps. You know, my dad couldn't understand what I'd done, and then I would go home and he would only talk about things like, are you playing for the football team? How's that going? And you would talk about things he could talk about, or acting, or stuff like that. The other stuff. Yeah, he couldn't. I don't think he ever understood why I went. And I think it must have been hard for him going down the club with his mates. And his mates probably would have wanted to chat about, hey, what's your son? And my dad, I don't know what he would have said in those situations. Must not have been easy.
Yeah, there can't have been many people from your community that have gone down.
Not that many, no. Well, one or two, but it wasn't normal. Yeah.
So you were up until you were 16 and then Ushaw?
Yes, and then went to Ushaw till I was early 20s.
Which really is like Hogwarts, isn't it?
Oh, it's massive.
If anyone hasn't been to... So it's now kind of an event space.
It's a bit like a National Trust property. You've got a big stately home, stunning gardens, theatre, lecture rooms.
There's what they call the chapel, but it really isn't a chapel. Yeah. It's like a mini cathedral. It's incredible.
Well, that's where I did my first sermon.
Really?
So
no pressure there.
It's the Pugin style where all the rows are right either side of you, facing in. Yeah. And imagine doing that to your peers. Yeah. And there's a big golden eagle lectern. So you'd go up these steps and you had to talk there to your mates and priests or your critics either side. It was quite... I remember the first one I did, I opened with an impression.
Of course.
I did, it was something about honesty or something. And George Bush, the first one, had just said, read my lips, no more tax. And it was a big lie because he taxed people. Yeah. And I opened with that, and it got a big laugh because people didn't normally open with an impression. Yeah. And I can't remember what the moral of the story was, but I can remember that bit.
Yeah, and I'd imagine they remembered it as well. You probably were talking about this for a while.
Yeah, it was... it was a very supportive place in many ways, and there were people who just didn't, I thought, fit with what should have been but they probably thought the same about me. I didn't fit their model of what an ideal trainee priest should be.
Yeah. And that was the end goal at that point, is to be
a Catholic priest, and I, at the same time, we were in the big building, but we used to go out every week to do pastoral work in different ways. So we used to go and visit old people in the local community in the first year. Then you would visit in a chaplaincy role, a primary school, then the next year a secondary school, and then you went to a hospital or a prison for a year. Okay. And again, I can't think of any other realm of life where you would have all those different experiences with a role of sort of authority or responsibility. Yeah. And you'd hear these stories and have an insight into a hospice or a prison, and for a year, where you were a regular visitor and ran a discussion group or listened to people, and it was utterly fascinating. A privilege, it's I remember when I got the job on local radio, this diehard journalist from Sunderland said, "What do you know about journalism?" And I thought, well, actually, not a lot technically, but I've worked in hospitals, prisons.
I've heard some amazing stories, I'm sure.
Stories every day, but very personal stories that people confide in you because of that role, education. So it was quite broad, me training, that helped me when I got into radio. Yeah. Yeah.
So, but then you changed direction again. Slight detour.
Yes,
I guess.
a sort of major detour in a way, because trained to be a Catholic priest, you would end up in charge of a parish eventually. And so I left the order. So I left training to be a normal priest to join a religious order called the Salesians of Don Bosco, who they'd really impressed me. They had students and teachers in our seminary, but they lived in their own little wing. But I became very friendly with them, helped them on some summer camps, and they always went and worked with poor kids in tough areas, places that needed it most. And they just impressed me, and I just got drawn towards them, and I was impressed they all took a vow of poverty, which we didn't. And I thought, this is more me. Yeah. This is more what it's about. Getting your hands dirty. It's much more about being out with people than in a church, just quietly saying prayers. You're getting your hands dirty. Yeah. And I just liked that. So I then had to tell the diocese I wasn't going to get ordained, and then I had to tell my family I wasn't getting ordained. They thought, "Oh, well, you're leaving? Okay, we can cut out." No, I'm going further in. I'm going deeper, because you had to then go away for a year and do what's called a novitiate, and you're not allowed home at all in that year. Right. So it's quite a tough, behind monastery walls in Dublin. Right. And we went out to study, but then we came back, and serious vow of poverty, and you didn't have anything. You didn't have a bottle of shampoo. You had to ask for anything that was required. Right.
But you kind of
I loved it. I did, and I did that for a year. Unfortunately, Dad died towards the end of that year, so I had to get a dispensation to go out for a day and see him, and then come back, and then he got really sick. During my first placement, I became a chaplain to a school in Liverpool. Right. Tough as nails, absolutely loved it. And I helped out with the drama group, because I knew these kids weren't going to listen to somebody coming in going, "Hey, do you want to go to church?" So I joined the PE department and the drama department, and they welcomed me in, because any spare hands with these sort of kids was more than welcome. I remember one day in the PE department, Mr. Mellon says, "It's athletics today, fellas." To me and the other PE teacher, he says, "I'm doing discus." He said, "You decide what you want to do, shot put or javelin." And I looked at the other teacher, he went, "There's no way I'm doing javelin with these kids." I had no I didn't have a certificate or anything. He goes off with the shot put, and I'll go out with these javelins with these kids. And it was, a real learning curve.
Well,
but it's brilliant. But it's brilliant. I absolutely loved those 2 years. And in the drama department, I met a great friend who his uncle was Eddie Braben, who wrote Morecambe and Wise. Yeah. And this was one of the turning points where I was helping the kids with drama. I was in a couple of shows in Liverpool with the kids. We had community productions, and it was great fun. We did Blood Brothers and a few with pantomime and stuff like this. It was great. And Stu says, "Will you be my best man?" And I said, "I'd love to." He said, "Uncle Eddie is going to be there." He said, "and he never laughs at anything." And I did the speech for Eddie Braben. I thought, I've got to make it. I loved Morecambe and Wise. Yeah. I could tell you could tell me loads of Morecambe and Wise jokes. They were written by Eddie Braben. Yeah. It's unbelievable. They had one writer. Yeah. And so I thought, I've got to make him laugh.
So that was a challenge.
So it was a challenge. And at the same time, I just left Liverpool. I went to London to do a drama degree because I was so enthused by that. It worked as a means to getting through to the kids. Right. So I thought, brilliant, I'll study drama and be able to teach it in one of our schools. Right.
But you were still part of this?
I was still in the order, yeah. Right. So I went and lived in this, the monastery was sort of a series of houses in a street in Battersea. And at the same time, I'm getting this speech ready for Eddie Braben. I'm going out and studying drama, but I didn't tell the students at this university what I was. Because I thought they won't swear, they won't speak to me, they'll treat me different, it'll be easy-ish. Yeah. So I thought, just don't tell them. So I got on like a house on fire. It was great. I'm doing this drama degree, and then one day it was getting too hard. I was having to lie because we got really friendly. Yeah. Well, you would if you're studying with people every day. Yeah. And after about 6 months or something, there was a session where everybody had to say something about themselves that nobody else knew. Right. So everybody's going around, I've never eaten a Twix or whatever. And it gets to me, and I went, I'm a monk. and everybody went, what? And I went, yeah, I'm in a... And the penny dropped. They went, it makes sense. Oh, that's why you couldn't come out with us. That's why you had to go back there. And everybody came over and hugged me. Right. But after that, nobody treated me any differently. Right. And so
it was to know you for you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So they carried on swearing and they carried on drinking and they carried on inviting me out and all that sort of stuff. So I was happy doing that. And in this drama degree, it was the first, I think, university to do a module in stand-up comedy.
Oh, really? Right.
And I was addicted. Yeah. I absolutely loved it. Yeah. And I'd had no feeling like this. And that's when things started to change. I go back to Liverpool to be best man for Eddie Braben's nephew. And I threw everything at it. I did best man speech, the musical. Almost like it was a Morecambe and Wise sketch. I had hats, wigs, I did impressions, I sang a song. And I handed out sheets, programs for everybody. And I had a top hat and it went crazy. And he led a standing ovation and came over to me. He's a Scouser. And he said, what do you do, son? And I said, I'm a monk. And he went, forget that, show business.
Really?
And that, plus the comedy course, it was like a ticking time bomb. Then I knew I wanted to try this. I think it's what had always been my real vocation, but I'd never admitted it. And then I went and told an old priest, Father John, who'd become the rector, and Father Jim, actually, and they knew I'd made my mind up. Yeah. But they were very encouraging. Maybe they wanted rid of me, but they were great. They were supportive, and some of them came to see shows I did, and it was brilliant. And so I had to go through the process of you have to write a letter to the Vatican, and you get one back in Latin, and all this, and it just means you leave. But you resign on good terms. It's almost like. Just a better way of leaving. Yes, and they were great. They were so supportive. Yeah.
But did you make him laugh though, Eddie Braben?
Oh yes, yeah. He took loads of pictures of the speech and sent them to me. Right. And he was the first one to stand up when I finished. It was great.
Because that's what we really want to know.
Yeah.
So what age were you there? So late.
So that would have been mid-20s, late 20s. Okay. Then I suppose, but then I had to carry on with the degree. Yeah. As I'd left, so I think I left halfway through the second year or towards the third year, and then and then I got 3 jobs straight away while I was still doing my degree. I'd never had money before. So
well, after taking a vow of poverty, I suppose.
Yes, yeah. Well, I remember Father John got me in his room. He says, "Listen, we don't dress like normal people." He said, you take some money out of the petty cash and buy yourself some clothes so you look like the students."
Oh, I see. Right.
So I remember going to Wembley Market and buying yellow jeans. I'm not far off today. Yellow jeans, a wacky... I thought, I'll just buy stuff students wear. I looked like none of them. I looked like a CBBC presenter or something wacky. Because I'd never... it was a bit like educating Rita when she says, I'm not one of them and I'm not one of you. Yeah. And you're somewhere in between. Yeah. And I was never quite one of them. It was a strange place to be. It was very hard leaving because that's all I'd done for 15 years. It was like, I suppose.
All you were expecting to do for the rest of your life, I guess.
Yes, that's all I thought I would ever do. Yeah. And I remember that it was the noise was the biggest change. Going into halls of residence was just, it was cacophonous, it was just noisy all day and night. And it was just, I was used to tranquility and getting up early when it was, and just hymns here and there and sort of very...
I can't think of 2 more extreme environments.
And it did send me a bit mad. It did send me mad, yeah. And I think, I don't know, maybe like leaving the army or leaving the military, but not as extreme as what those people have to go through. But it sent me mad. I went crackers for I'd never been 18 or 21. I'd never drank properly or...
all the other things at 18-year-olds.
Yes, so I did all that when I was 30 in about 6 months. And the students thought it was great. Oh, look, we've got them out. We'll show them a good time. And it was great. And I went crazy for a short amount of time. And then I thought, right, you've done that now. Let's
go out of the system.
Yeah.
So at what point did it start to become a career?
Well, immediately upon leaving, I got a job. My first job was as a toy demonstrator in Harrods. So I was doing that by day, and then a bike courier. I did loads of jobs in London. You have to do anything you can to just survive. Because I loved London, but I never had a penny. I was just always struggling. So I would cycle to gigs at night, but I was absolutely voracious in chasing gigs down. And I was very lucky. Almost immediately, I started comparing residencies, little pubs and clubs, and that was it. I was sort of booked pretty quickly. Right. But I didn't give up. I started working doing kids' camps again, football and drama and stuff like that with a friend of mine in North London. And I remember being on a tour of universities. There's this big... If you could get on the Avalon tour was all the universities. And the first one I did was with Paul Sinha from The Chase. Yeah. And we were best mates. Me, him and Rob Rouse got on great. And then the next year I did it with Reginald D. Hunter. And I remember Rob Rouse saying to me, "You've got to give up your day job." Right. He said, you are a full-time comedian and you're trying to do these day jobs. And I can't, just in case. Yeah. And it wasn't until... I suddenly realised I was a full-time comedian. It wasn't like today I'm giving up the job. Right. It was just I can no longer turn up for these other jobs. Yeah. So they just sort of fizzled away. Right. And I thought, I'm doing this full-time now.
Because there's no sort of set career path, is there? You
just and it certainly, I mean, now some comedians are like that and they're very, very professional. But at that time, we didn't know... that Michael McIntyre hadn't been on telly. They hadn't been live at the Apollo. There wasn't the amount of saturation of comedy on telly. Yeah. Just there was the one show. Barry Cryer did a late night stand-up show after Match of the Day, and that was it. Right. And it was a very small thing. And
so it was all live gigs.
It was all just turning up to open spots, open mics in pubs. The odd tour, like a student tour of student universities, and then the very occasional theatre. Right. And then eventually it snowballs, and eventually someone will ask you to support them, and it grows slowly, but I was pretty voracious, hammering the phones, and had an exercise book, and I would just go through it. But it was like living on tour, you know. Some months I would have 30 gigs.
Right.
So.
But it sounds like the sort of thing you've really got to want to do.
Oh yeah.
There's no half measures.
I don't know. You know, I wasn't married then, no children, no commitments. So I could go to Plymouth one day and Edinburgh the next, and then maybe a gig abroad, and then come back and do a weekend at Jongleurs or the Comedy Store or somewhere. It was a chaotic but brilliant time. You know, I loved it.
Yeah. And so at what point did it start to become a bit more kind of settled, or a bit more...
I suppose it was never settled fully, but I remember I was gigging up and down the country a lot, and my best man, Byrne, lived in Manchester. I was staying with him a lot. He said, why don't you move out of London and come to Manchester? You're here more than you're there. Right. It'll be so much cheaper. Lodge here, and then you won't have as far to travel to your gigs. So I took it was a big jump, because when you live in London's like a drug. It makes you think you should be there. Yeah. And I did. And I remember other people saying, well, that's going to be the end of your career. Yeah. Moving to Manchester, what you doing there? But I was very lucky, because the BBC just opened a comedy unit in Manchester. Right. The Comedy Store just opened in Manchester. 2 big clubs had opened in Liverpool and one in Leeds. And it just became like the M62 corridor was just chock full of big gigs. Right. And I ended up comparing loads of them. I ended up getting lots of work at the BBC and doing lots of TV warm-up work, you know, where the comedian who goes on between the takes. Oh, yeah. So I did University Challenge and lots of shows like that, sketch shows, game shows. And so...
Have a warm-up guy for University Challenge?
Oh.
I wouldn't have...
Well, that was exactly what I said. My agent phoned me. Funny story, Terry. My agent phoned me. He says, they want a warm-up guy for University. I went, University Challenge? I said, what do they need? That's not comedy or anything. He said, no, they've had the same guy since Bamba Gascoigne. He's retiring. And they've seen you do some, so would you come along? So I went, oh, great. It's a legendary show, you know. So I go along. Floor manager says, oh, dead easy, this. You do 10 minutes, and that's it. And then the show starts as live, and there's no breaks. So your job done. The hardest bit is the audience. They don't have a live audience for Mastermind or University Challenge anymore since COVID. They've just got a countdown, no audience. So I looked out, and the audience were pensioners who they bus in, and students, and nothing in between. So it is a bit of you've got to be pretty...
And they're not going along for a laugh, are they?
No. So you've got there's different tricks you can use and different things I put in place to make me enjoy the situation and make it work. So the very first show I did was Worcester University in St Andrews. I remember you introduce them out, and then you introduce Paxman, and then and your job's done. Right. First show, they get about 2 minutes in, and a buzzer gets stuck and won't stop. So they go, oh, Derek, can you fix this? Alfie, you're on again. Right. So I've done me 10 minutes. So I come back on. Well, I'm looking over my shoulder every few minutes. He's nowhere near fixing this. Even Paxman's joining in. I'm getting done everything I've ever known, you know, for about half an hour. And then eventually he fixed it. I went back to the floor. I thought you said this is easy. But it was great training, you know. It was really good work. Yeah. And I started to get lots of that. Yeah. And I was, you know, on my way to being one of the main warm-up people in Granada. Ted Robbins was the biggest. He was the king. Right. But he was trying to... I got some of the work he was turning down, you know, so...
So is that a different sort of skill set, if you like, to doing stand-up where you're the main attraction?
Yeah, because nobody's there to see you.
Yeah.
It's very, very long. So you could be there for a 4-hour shoot.
Really?
And it's tedious. But the audience are desperate to go.
And you just get wheeled out whenever they need to keep them entertained.
So if you don't get it right, every time you're coming on, the audience is going, oh, here we again. Yeah, another light bulb's got to be fixed. Or I did one, I think the hardest one to do was Al Murray's pub landlord.
Right.
He did a sitcom. It was short-lived. It didn't really work. But because it was set in a pub, every time there was a cut, they had to come round somebody with a clipboard and go, right, that drink was that full.
Oh, right.
That drink was that full. Absolute nightmare, you know. So you got to do that, rearrange the drinks every time there's a cut. So they're some of the longest nights of my life. But I was in demand. I was enjoying it, and people were going. Oh, people were asking for me to do theirs. Right. So that was good.
And so when you were doing those sorts of jobs, were you hungry to be the main attraction, or were you quite happy?
Well, again, going back to what I said earlier, I had no real. You know, I was doing what other people were doing, trying to write a sitcom, trying to write a Edinburgh show, whatever, that sort of stuff. But I never really saw myself as the main attraction. But because of that, because I was in the mix and going into Granada all the time, purely from that, I got asked to be in Coronation Street. Mm-hmm. So I did a couple of episodes of Coronation Street just from being around. Right. I got asked to audition for a sitcom, which was with Johnny Vegas. And again, total bit of luck,
just
really.
Being in the right place.
I was just, because I'd moved to Manchester and I was around the BBC comedy unit, and that's where they were making things. They said, do you want to audition for this? Right. I didn't go and ask. Right. They said, audition for this. So I went, all right. And there was a part of a rat catcher who was in one episode. I thought, oh, that'll do me. and they said, oh, while you come, will you go for this other part as well? And I knew it was set in the Northwest set, and I knew a Geordie had been cast, Seymour Mace, who's very funny. And he'd been cast already. So I thought they won't have two people from the Northeast in a Northwest-based sitcom.
One Geordie's enough.
One's enough. So I thought I'll do it in a Scouse accent. Right. So this character was a gardener who was a semi-regular character. So the line was about purple sprout and broccoli, and that was.
I think only someone who's either from Liverpool who spent a long
or lived there,
time there could manage that.
Well, that got me the part. So total luck, you know, that I was asked to do it when I hadn't knocked on the door to do it, and then just that line, just when you said purple sprout and broccoli like a Scouser, we thought that's
He's
it.
the man for us.
But if I'd done it as me, I wouldn't have got it. So, been a look. But I was in that for 7 years. Really? With Johnny Vegas, and Sean Locke was in it, and Tom Goodman Hill, who's in that reindeer drama, Baby Reindeer. So some amazing actors, and I met one of my best mates, Ben Crompton, who's in Game of Thrones. Right. So it's phenomenal.
Because you do get the sense from watching things like that and Lab at the Apollo and stuff that there's a real kind of community or a sort of just a gang of people who kind of bump into each other at different places and kind of have almost, grown up in their careers together. Yeah,
you do. There is a sort of a camaraderie, a loviness about it. And that's where that lovey thing comes from. Because you don't see each other much, but when you do, it's quite intense. Yeah. And you're with each other for long hours. Or with comics, if you go and do Cardiff, it'll be Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So you spend all day together. Well, you don't spend all day with some members of your family. So you do get into, long, lengthy conversations, and you have a great weekend. You're all rooting for each other sort of thing. So it is that sort of career,
So you've hit the big time.
I wouldn't have said that. Well. Yeah. And then out of the blue, I just got married. All this warm-up work's coming in, but I'm doing lots of stand-up here, there and everywhere, going abroad. I was doing cruise ships, doing expat gigs in Singapore, Shanghai. And then out of the blue, I got offered a job on the radio in Newcastle. Right. And I never thought I'd move back to the Northeast. Right. I thought Manchester, middle of the country, a lot of me industry was revolved around that area. And I thought, I'll never move back to the Northeast. And then,
had you done any radio at that point?
Yeah, I had a weekly slot on BBC Scotland for Fred Macaulay, who's a comedian. Oh, yeah. I did an Edinburgh show in my car, which got Alfie Joey's mini cabaret. I thought it would just be a bit different, and it turned out it worked, because most people lose a ton of money at the Edinburgh Festival and don't sell. I think the average audience figure is about 7. This was 2003.
Right.
So I thought, if I do a show in my car, I only have to sell more than one. I have 2 shows. I can do 2 shows a day.
And it's my car.
And it's my car, so that's the theatre. So, and anyway, I mentioned it to me agent, and he says, this is a bit more complicated than you think. We've got to register your car as a theatre. So the fire brigade had to come out and check the car. Check the exits and check. And they went, if we could give you any advice, we'd just say don't have too much petrol in them when it's parked. And so they didn't have anything to say. They couldn't think of. And I'd have permission to park where I parked, but it was a sellout for the full run. And I'd have mates walking past dejected, going, I only had 7 in today. I only had 4 in, but I sold out. And it ended up on telly. I was on Sky News. Australian TV did a feature on me, because it was one of them. People weren't doing hugely quirky stuff at the fringe at this sort of stage. Right. So that year, there was a show in a lift and a show in a toilet and a show in a car. Right. And Anne Robinson asked a question about it on The Weakest Link. Mm-hmm. So it became a thing, know. And about that time was when I think I got asked to go on the radio, and would I come and
did you jump at the chance, or was it?
Well, yeah, because I'd done the show at the festival, that's how I ended up on the Fred Macaulay show on BBC Scotland. I'd filled in for Toby Foster on BBC Sheffield a couple of times and thought, this is not for me. Right. It's just quite an intense thing. It's 3-hour shows and a lot of concentration. I remember the first couple of times I did it, I just wanted to lie in a darkened room. It was just...
And it's every day.
Yeah.
Which you hadn't really done it before.
No, and I thought, playing music, I don't really like the music. They sort of playing really. So... I'm a Sinatra man. Right. And so I thought, that's not really for me. And then I went and met the boss of BBC Newcastle. And also, at that time, my wife did not like me going away all the time. Yeah. And if we just got married, we were going to start a family. Yeah. She said, this could be a bit of, you go out, you do that, you come home, and you still do the odd gig at night.
Normality.
It was the afternoon show. Right. So I then said yes. And I went up to Newcastle. We moved. My wife had never been there properly, and we just moved and lived in Gateshead. And I'd see how this happened. We didn't know how long it would last, and I ended up there for nearly 15 years. So,
and loved it.
Absolutely, and sometimes my wife said, "You got out of comedy at the right time." All my mates ended up on telly and all sorts, but. For stability and for the family, it was perfect. It was absolutely brilliant. I loved it, absolutely loved it. And I was on the afternoon show, which was a light, fun, show-busy sort of music and guests and little funny comedy features. And I did it for about a year. And then the boss went, I want you to fill in on the breakfast show, which was all news, sport, all speech, no songs. Really? Right. But I'd be with a journalist, Charlie Charlton, and we did a handful of stand-in shows, and he went, "You're the new breakfast show." So, and I'm not a trained journalist, but here I was interviewing politicians. If you told me upon getting you'll be interviewing Kwasi Kwarteng and Keir Starmer 3 times, I would have said, "You're off your." I wouldn't trust me with that, but I ended up doing it.
Did you? Were there any aspects of the kind of the comedy career that you missed when you were doing that more serious stuff?
I suppose I hung in there, and I'm still a bit like this. I hung in there doing bits of stand-up, and I still do it. I've got 2 gigs next week of stand-up, and I'm frustrated because I'm always trying to remember what I used to do rather than what I'd like to do. I just haven't got time to do as much new stuff, and I never fulfilled that, I suppose. So that would be it. I still get that joy. I still get that kick. Yeah. And I don't really have any... As I say, I over-collaborate. I know what all the mistakes were. I know where I could have chased stuff more. Yeah. But like you say, be careful what you wish for.
Well, exactly, because you never know where you would have ended up, do you?
Yeah.
And if you're happy, as you clearly are,
I loved the balance, and I loved, picking the kids up from school and cooking tea, and then I just saw them throughout the childhood. Whereas if I'd been on the road, you could half that, at least.
So we're pretty much. Are we pretty much halfway through your
I think we're
career, do you think?
well over the hill now, Terry.
No, that's not the case at all. So should we stop for a cup of tea and a biscuit?
Oh, that sounds great. That sounds brilliant.
Hear what happened next.
Let's do that.
Right, we'll see you shortly. Welcome back. As you can see, we've got a nice cup of tea and also a plate of biscuits. For those of you who are new to Northern Spotlights, my first question is, why is it taking you so long? But then you might be wondering why we have a plate of biscuits, because but every one of my guests is asked what their favourite biscuit is, because it's only fair that they get to choose. And we've had some really interesting stories as a result of that. So no pressure, Alfie.
Right.
You asked for any kind of shortbread. I chose lemon shortbread.
Yeah. Well, you've injected flavour into the humble shortbread, which I didn't expect, so I thank you for that. But I haven't eaten chocolate for about 15 years. So I probably would have gone for the humble Jaffa cake.
Right.
There's nothing humble about a Jaffa cake. It's quite fancy.
It's quite marvellous.
So I thought, what biscuit do I like without chocolate?
Right.
And I'm a big fan. I love cartoon characters. I love comic books. Yeah. Do you remember the Bruins and Woolly?
Of course, yeah.
So the shortbread reminded me of the Bruins and Woolly.
Really? Yeah, because he's alternated, didn't it? With 1 year it was Willie, the next year was the Bruins.
And it used to come as a newspaper sort of comic strip in the Sunday Post, which was a Scottish newspaper. It is a Scottish newspaper that seeped its way into the northeast.
Yeah.
And I did a dinner recently with a bloke who was great company, and his father-in-law still draws the Bruins.
Really?
And I think he sends it away. He still draws hand, pen, ink, and he sends it off with a bike courier, comes and collects it and takes it to DC Thompson in Scotland. Yeah.
Wow.
So the humble shortbread.
Not quite as humble as we might think.
Yeah, with a bit of lemon.
Exactly. So
we have a go. Oh, full of crumbs now.
Excuse us while we enjoy.
Do you know why I like the shortbread as well? My kids don't. So that's it, they're all mine.
So, you said you haven't eaten chocolate for 15 years.
That was because when I started doing the afternoon show on the radio, that's the time of day that most people slump. You get that? That's why when people have siestas in hot countries. And I was no different. So I'd go on air about 1 o'clock and I would just feel fatigue. So I used to go to the canteen at the BBC and just buy about 4 chocolate bars every day. I have a Boost and a Twix and a whatever. And I started to put on weight pretty quickly because I was just... I was eating them as if they were cereal bars or some kind of energy boost, but it's fake and it doesn't work. And I'm one of these all or nothing at all type of people. So I went, right.
So you just cut it out.
I'm just not going to have chocolate. And then the only time I brought me duck, I interviewed at a business event on stage the fella who invented Hotel Chocolat.
Oh, yeah.
Angus Thirlwall. Yeah. His dad invented Mr. Whippy.
No.
Good trivia fact, yeah. Who's... And on the Mr. Whippy team was a young chemist called Margaret Thatcher.
That's right.
So, anyway, I'm interviewing the inventor of Hotel Chocolat, I thought, what would make this magical or interesting? I hadn't eaten chocolate for about 5 or 6 years. And I told him, I said, I haven't eaten chocolate. And he looked really disappointed. I said, but I'm prepared to break me duck if you teach me how. Because I knew he did a chocolate taste test. So it made it a bit of an event, and everybody leaned forward and watched me eat chocolate the way it was like doing a wine tasting, but with chocolate. And he talks you through how to do it properly. It was brilliant. So it was worth it.
And that once was enough for you?
That was, he said, this is not like a Boost bar. This is a different kind of chocolate. And he was right. It's just exceptional chocolate. Yeah. So if I was going to eat chocolate again, I think I'd be a chocolate snob.
Right.
I did a show called Hebburn.
Well,
with Gina McKee from Peterlee, great actress, and I spent quite a bit of a day with her. You sat with them chairs with sort of actory chairs on a street in Salford, and she was telling me she's a chocolate snob and loves exquisite chocolate.
So if the marketing team for Hotel Chocolate happen to be watching this show, then feel free. We have biscuits. We could equally have chocolate to offer to the guests. So do get in touch. I'll put my email address somewhere on the screen. So you mentioned Hebburn. For me, the funniest thing about Hebburn was the fact that there was a show called Hebburn. Because I'm from Jarrow, born and raised, went to school in Hebburn. And Heburn's not the most
well-known
place, is it really? So just the fact that it was called Hebburn, I just found hilarious. So here we have you on.
There you go.
So you were the GP?
Yes, Vic Reeves had a heart complaint. Yeah. So I was his doctor. And Jason Coop wrote this and was in it. Great comedian, brilliant Northeast filmmaker, and he's so creative. And he came up with this. There was 2 series and a Christmas special. And I thought it was lovely. I thought it was really nice, very affectionate. Yeah. Jarrah gets plenty of mentions.
Well, the Jarrah lads.
The Jarrah lads, of course. So I had an amazing time. We shot quite a bit down in Salford. That's where a lot of it was made. But they did exterior shots in Hebburn.
And it was in the street in Hebburn, wasn't it?
Yeah. So when they did the Hebburn bits, I went down to interview people in my radio job.
Right.
And went down to acting in my acting job in Salford. So it was brilliant.
Yeah. And how did that come about? Did someone approach you and thought you'd be really good for this?
Jason. Yes. he just said, "Do you want to play the doctor?" Right. And that was it. I can't even remember auditioning. I think I just turned up and did it. And it's quite a small part, but I'm in both series. Yeah. And one episode I'm heavily with him, and then another episode with her. So it's just like a dream. I think they're both absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah. You didn't get the impression that Jason invited, just asked people that he knew.
Well, I saw there was a series of pilots done as in a studio down in Granada, and I saw the pilot of it without any of apart from Chris Ramsey, I think, and Jason, but generally it was different actors.
Right.
So, and it was called the Sitcom Trials. And there was about 6 or 7 different episodes. It was a good idea, good way of testing or workshopping which one would work. And that one stood out. Yeah. It was great. But there was a lot of, and remember there being quite a bit of speculation would Denise Welch play the mum, and would Mickey Hutton or someone else play the dad. Yeah. And when I heard it was them two, I went, how clever is that? They were a brilliant couple. Just a brilliant, I thought it was a really brilliantly played.
There was a lot of warmth, wasn't it?
Yeah,
about the whole thing.
Yeah, Jason writes like that. His comedy's like that. Right. He does warmth, tears and comedy next to each other brilliantly, I think.
Yeah, it's very good. Available on iPlayer, I believe.
Well, it's just gone back on iPlayer because I haven't watched it since I was in it, so I'm going to watch it again with my kids, I think, because they haven't seen me in it.
Really, they haven't seen it,
and they haven't watched it, but they'll enjoy it now. Yeah. And it's, I know it's back on because I'm getting messages from people who, hey, you're right, I've just started watching this. I didn't watch it first time round, so it's quite nice.
Well, I did watch it the first time round, but I think I might have another go because I really enjoyed it the first time. So there's another recommendation, viewers. as well as Hotel Chocolate. Watch Hebburn on iPlayer, you'll enjoy it.
Great fun.
So, because you've done a few, as we've heard, you've done a few sort of TV things.
Well,
have you ever hankered to have your own TV? I mean, and this is a recurring theme.
Yeah.
You'd rather be, but is that something?
I did write a couple of sitcom ideas and different sketchy ideas, but I've never really give it everything, and I've never really pursued it because radio was all consuming.
Right.
And while I pitched a few things, you've really got to throw the kitchen sink at these sort of things to really make it work and get contacts and pursue it properly. And I never did.
Yeah.
You can't do everything.
Well, this is true. Because as I said at the beginning, it was difficult to know how to describe it.
Yeah.
So the Radio Newcastle, that was, how long you were on there for? What, 15 years?
Nearly 15 years. On the breakfast show for about 13 years. And it was all consuming, you know. It was because you've got to get in so early, you've got to get up really early. And I remember the amount of times we'd do, the subject of sleep comes up a lot on the news and on the radio. How much sleep you should have, how little sleep can damage your health, your mental health, your physical health. And every time one of these stories come up, we'd all look at each other going, that's us. Yeah. And I didn't realise how shattered I was till I stopped doing it.
Right.
And I remember I hadn't read a book for about, and I always used to have a book on the go. I could read Charles Dickens, I could read Gothic novels, you know, I wasn't a voracious reader, but I always had a book on the go until I started doing the breakfast show. And then I realised I stopped reading.
Really? Because it just occupies so much of
I blame my kids.
Oh, really?
I used to, I can't concentrate anymore since I've had them. And then when I stopped the breakfast show, I remember sitting down, reading it was a business book by Sarah Pittendrig, who's become a friend. She's a really good business person, an amazing story. And I literally read her book start to finish in, 2 sittings, I would say. And I went, it wasn't the kids. It was the breakfast show, because I never stopped thinking about that show.
Yeah.
And what you do is you do the show.
Because you've got an early start, presumably.
Yeah, very early start. And you've got to come in and you don't just turn up and turn the mic on. You've got to prep, and whatever show's being prepared changes because of what's happening in the world, and different stories come in, and somebody else famous might have died, or, so you've got to address that or research it and be on it. And then you finish the show, and then you have a meeting and prepare the next day's show. But a lot of that might go in the bin because the world turns around and things change. And also, I'd get home and think, right, tomorrow we've got Keir Starmer on the show or whoever. Right. I better know everything about that. I would listen to about 3 podcasts. I'd know we'd be talking about breastfeeding in public or something else. And I've got to know about that. Right. Research, read up on it. And also, every day I had quizzes to write and we'd always have a fun story that I wanted people to text in or tweet in about. So I would post, I'd think about what that would be all day. I didn't want a really obvious one. Yeah. I always wanted something a bit different. So I would post that out on Twitter at 8 o'clock at night and then respond to anyone in that first hour who'd responded listener-wise. So it was just crazy, really. And I stopped all that when the radio stopped, and I went, flipping heck, what was I doing? I was obsessed, but I was obsessed in a healthy way. I wanted it to be a good, fresh show every day.
But it sounds like you never switched off.
No, I didn't. And all for the good of the show.
Yeah.
But big crackers, really. Yeah.
So that was what, a couple of years ago now?
Yes, getting up to, it'll be 2 years in October, yeah.
And then, so what came after that? Well, why? What was the reason for?
Well, I'll tell you exactly what happened. During COVID, they changed the model of all breakfast shows, all shows up and down the country, for a very good reason. It was very clever. Because they thought, right, what happens if I get COVID? Or the breakfast team gets wiped out with COVID, which is what was happening in lots of places. Yeah. So they said, right, what happens if we all do 4-hour shows all around the country, and they all mirror each other's footprint? So if my show goes down at BBC Newcastle, BBC Tees or BBC Cumbria can pick up the reins.
Oh, I see.
As it happens, I'd I did nearly a full year without being off.
Right.
So it was a good idea. I thought it was a great idea. And also, when things go wrong on local radio, you can feel more people tuning in. They come to you because they need local knowledge. They need local support. And that's when you come into your own. I think local radio, whether there's a storm, whether there's local elections, whether there's... They can't get what they need on 5 Live or Radio 4. Yeah. They need, Alice Wiseman from Gateshead, Health, coming on, telling you your local stuff is on local radio and you can feel it spike. And and I had lots of people sending me messages on all social media platforms saying, can you get, my business is struggling, I do this. So I was just all consumed by it. It was a great idea to do what they did with the shows, but then classic BBC went, actually, this format works, we're going to keep it.
Oh, really?
And I thought, I can't sustain this and go back to doing nighttime gigs and doing, hosting awards and hosting events. It'll kill me. It's just impossible. And then I was thinking, I might need to do something else here. And again, as if by magic, Ray Spencer, who is the director of the Customs House, Panto, great guy, he'd be a brilliant guest on Northern Spotlights. He's the Panto we visited. So we used to take our kids there. Well, I'd go and review all of them. We've got great pantomimes in the Northeast, but this was the special one for us as a family. We loved it. Yeah. So Ray said, can you come over? I want to chat with you. Right. No idea what he wanted. He said, I've seen your drawings. You've been doing kids' books and stuff like that. He said they would make great backdrops for the cloths.
Oh,
for Panto.
Right. Yeah.
Design the sets. Yeah. I said, oh, great. That's beyond me. That's too big. He went, no, I've seen them. You could do it. It was like he'd hired an actor. He took me into the theatre. There was a fella up some ladders. And he went, Mike, come down. Mike comes down from Durham Scenic. They design the CBeebies Panto every year. Right. And he went, Michael, build what you design. I went, whoa, I hadn't said yes. And he's like talking me into it.
It doesn't sound like you had a chance to say all the
Ray's very persuasive. And then he said, you also do the costumes. I went, I can't do costumes. He went, yeah, I've seen your pictures, you can do costumes. And then he said, I said, Ray, if I did this, I would have to leave the BBC. He said, well, when would that be? I said, well, my contract wouldn't be till October, 9 months away or something. And he said, oh, great, well, you can be in it as well. And it was just like, this is crazy. But that was it. My mind was made up then, just to work with Ray, work with that theatre that our family loves. Yeah. And
there's another recommendation, viewers. If you haven't been to the pantomime at the Customs House in South Shields, I mean, all pantomimes are great, but that one is...
It's special. There's something really warm, special about it. Yeah. And Ray and Graham Thompson, they've created this place called Cooksonville, and it's just this representation of South Shields. It's just something a bit special, and it's brilliant. And so that was it. And I said, well, who would I be if I was going to be in it? He said, we're doing Robin Hood. He said, you can play all of the merry men. So it was crackers, I had hats, wigs, I was on stilts as Little John. It was nuts. So I was off and on every few minutes. It was crazy.
It sounds right up your street, though.
Oh, yeah. It was back to doing the Eddie Braben sort of all singing, all dancing wedding speech. But brilliant. So that was me get out.
Right.
But pantomime only lasts till January. So I had to think beyond that. And a good friend of mine who I was on his podcast and on his YouTube series, Business Stuff podcast, Martin Wardle from Robson Laidler, he asked me along and I told him his story. I told him I was leaving the BBC. On the day I announced it to the listeners, I told him on his podcast. So he had a little bit of a scoop.
Right.
And then at the end, when the camera stopped, he said, what are you doing after pantomime? I said, I haven't really thought too much about that because it's a few months away. He went white because he's a businessman. And he said, so what could you do? I said, well, I could do a bit of drawing. He said, what would you get paid if you, say, went to do caricatures at a wedding?
Okay.
I went, oh, I don't know, maybe 300. And he's getting more and more worried, I could see. And I went home and he contacted me, he went, you need a business plan and we'll help you.
Right.
And they did. Right. And they got me in and they asked me 1,000 questions and got me to do this 1-page plan, which is brilliant. And Robson Laidley, they do it superbly for lots of businesses and lots of people. They ask the right questions. Right. And so from that, I started a podcast. And
that was probably the first time you'd had any kind of plan in terms of...
Yeah, absolutely. Everything else had happened by accident. And again, this was an accident. But they, by asking me loads of questions, made me realise where I could bring value and where I could...
Right. Even though you're not a typical business and a typical sort of client.
Well, I thought so.
Yeah.
I thought I'm not business-minded whatsoever. I'm alien to that world. I love going into that world and interviewing people. And I've interviewed Sir John Timpson, Hotel Chocolate, all these different creators and founders. Love it. But then... I looked back and thought I'd always been an enterprising kid. And I think lots of us were then. These things don't happen as much now, but I had 3 paper rounds. I went and did my headmaster's garden for money. I'd go and do carol singing. I'd do anything to make money. And I was always trying to create stuff and build stuff. Well, that's business.
Yeah.
But I'm a dreadful business person. I'm not money motivated whatsoever. And that's where sort of Robson, Laidley and Martin sort of gave me a bit of focus and said, look, you do these things, the art stuff and the kids' books, they're important to you, but they're not going to make you huge amounts of money and they're a long game. Yeah. But you need to look at some other ways of making more serious income to replace the radio work. Yeah. And it was through all these questions that they came up with me being a keynote speaker, being a more serious event host, and coaching people to do public speaking. Right. Because I didn't realise I'd done it for decades. Yeah. I'd given a sermon in a cathedral. I'd spoke on radio, telly.
And it sounds like you'd never had an issue with doing that, unlike probably 95%
most people,
of the population.
Most people, it fills them with dread, fear. But now it's the age of the podcast, it's the age of YouTube, it's the age of the panel. Yeah. So people who even don't consider themselves to be a public speaker have to do a Zoom meeting or some kind of public presentation when 5 or 6 years ago, there'd be no chance of them doing it. Yeah. So he said, there's your gap. Right. There it is. Right. And so I started, I've been to Sunderland University, coaching lecturers, Newcastle University, coaching students. Again, haven't asked to be in any of those places. And because of the I suppose, the reputation or the workload I've built up, people are going, can you come and help us? Can you come and help us? So it's snowballing. The one last piece of the jigsaw, I suppose, I'd like to just get into place is keynote speaking. I'm doing a little bit of that. Right. I want to do a little bit more. And I speak about speaking.
Oh, I see. Right.
So I can give a talk at a conference, a multi-speaker event, where I go in and say, I can help you make an impression, whether it's you as an individual, appearing on a panel or a podcast, or whether it's your charity, or just on a Zoom meeting, or just to make you more comfortable with your own staff. Yeah. I'm passionate about it. Yeah. I love it. It's what I've done lots of. Yeah. And I just want to impart that knowledge and give tips, tools and tactics to people who might feel they struggle with it.
Yeah. So this is going to put you on the spot a little bit, but if there was one tip, because I used to hate public speaking.
Yeah.
I love it now. I'm not saying I'm any good at it, but I love being in front of an audience. Yeah. But for me, the only way to get better at it is just to do it and just keep hating it and hating it and then hating it a little bit less and then not minding it too much. And then eventually it gets to the point where actually I quite like this.
It's a skill. It's a skill. It's not a talent. It's not a gift. It's a skill. And I say the same about comedy. It's a skill. And you'll only get good by doing it and doing it and doing it. And if I was going to give you one tip, I would say nerves are good.
Yeah.
Nerves are great. Nerves mean you care. And it's just how you frame it. It's just what you call it.
Yeah.
So a lot of people...
excitement.
Yes.
About being
Well, that's exactly what I said to some lecturers at Sunderland University. We're just about to do some workshops in front of cameras in the David Putnam Suite in the media centre, and they look terrified. Now, these people have diplomas and PhDs, and they're highly intelligent people, far better at their subject than I'll ever be.
Well, that counts for nothing, does it, when you're in front of a lot of people?
One of them said to me, I said, any questions before we start? Looking at how scared they look, I said, this is going to be okay, I'll make it easy for you. And one of them said, what do you think about imposter syndrome?
Right.
And I said, how do you think I felt today, coming in here? A coal miner's son from a few pit villages that way, coming in to talk to lecturers with PhDs and diplomas. I said, I'm very intimidated. I said, but first of all, don't call it a syndrome. Syndromes are horrible. And turn it on its head and just call it humble excitement.
Right. Yeah.
Suddenly, it means you care.
It's a totally different
Suddenly,
spin on it, isn't it?
absolutely, it's just what you call it. So I always want to be nervous. You know, two of my favourite singers, two of the best singers of the last century, Barbra Streisand and Frank Sinatra, nervous throughout their whole career. And, you know, what's wrong with that? Elvis Presley was nervous. That means that you're in the right place if you're nervous. I think if you're not nervous, you're someone like Donald Trump or someone who just doesn't have any awareness. Yeah. I think nerves are healthy. It means you want to be good. It's just how you deal with it, how you manage it. If you're
step out in front of hundreds of people and you're not nervous, then that's when you should be worried.
Absolutely. It means, I think you're blasé, it means you're too casual. So I think just enjoy. There was a football coach, Paul Dixon, who coached a few of us at the BBC, and he's a non-league footballer and now commentator. He's a great fella. And he used to say, enjoy the ball, lads. Enjoy the ball. So I say to people now, enjoy the mic. Enjoy it. Look at it. And now this might sound romantic or something, but even before I go on to do an event, or still, I've been doing it for 25 years, I'll look at that microphone in a shaft of light and look at it and think, I get to do this. How good's that? How good's that? I could be sweeping the streets, I could be fitting carpets, I could be doing something that I would find hard. I get to do that. And there's lots of body language things. You can do the power stances before you go on and play with that sort of stuff. But I literally tell myself, look at that. You get to do that. It's good. It's good. I don't look at it and go, this is going to be awful. I turn it on its head. I flip it and think, how good is this?
And I think also the fact that the people, your audience, want you to be good as well.
So
just be good.
Most of the time, most audiences want you to do well. I sometimes do ask, if I'm doing a daytime conference where they've been press ganged into coming along, I usually like to find out if they've been told to be there or did they want to be there. And that usually breaks the ice if they have been told to be there. And then I'll have kid gloves with them. But I usually find most audiences, they're getting out of work to be there, or they're going to improve their work by being there.
Now you mentioned humble excitement. I think there's we do need to bring up this award that you won last year.
Well, I did.
Because we get the impression that you're a humble guy, but sometimes
I'm much more comfortable giving out awards than getting them, and that's handy because I've hardly won it. So this was Communicator of the Year at the CIPR Awards, a big PR up and down the country body, and I've hosted these awards for years, and they didn't ask me this year, so I was a bit put out, but they asked me along to draw it. So I sometimes draw events. You have these people who draw events now, and I sometimes do a bit of that. So I went along to draw it, and then they announced me at the end as the Communicator of the Year. Couldn't believe it. And a lot of it is to do with my output on social media and what I put out on LinkedIn, and I've embraced that world because I've had to.
Well, you have to, I think, yeah.
Well, some people say, why, Guy, you put a lot of stuff on Guy, you're very active on LinkedIn, and I'm thinking, I don't know what the alternative is.
Yeah.
I don't know what. If I didn't do it, I wouldn't get any work. That's where I get me. I haven't got an agent. Yeah. That's it. I just put stuff out there. People see it and go, oh, will you do that for us? Yeah. I have to do it.
Yeah. So what's next? Because it's still quite a new phase of your career, I guess.
It is. Well, I think at long last, I want to do so. You know, I've got something I actually want to get to, which is I'd like to do more keynote speaking, because I do loads of comparing, I do loads of facilitating, which I really love. But you end up doing what you're doing now. You do all the research, you do all the prep, and you do all that work for this, and then it all goes in the bin. Whereas if you're introducing or facilitating lots of speakers, and excuse me, I'm enjoying the shortbread too much, it's repeating on me. So I find the people who come in and do the 45 minutes or an hour do that roughly that same thing everywhere they go at each conference, and they can just rinse and repeat or freshen it up constantly. Yeah. Whereas I'm having to start from scratch with every event as an MC, and I just think I need to try and be the other guy a bit more, not all the time, because I still love MCing and hosting and interviewing. Yeah.
So if anybody's watching and they want a keynote speaker,
I'm your man.
Want to know about how to speak in front of other people or many other things.
And I tell lots of stories, and I do impressions along the way as well. So,
yeah, well, we expect nothing. Well, we'll look forward to seeing where you're going to pop up next.
Well, great. Well, thanks very much, Terry. You've been great.
Are you going to be in Pantomime again this year, do you think?
Oh, yes, I am.
So which one is it?
I will be at the Customs House again. I'm playing the mayor in Mother Goose.
Okay.
So
one of the probably lesser known of the pantomimes, or
it's. I'll be honest with you. I had to look up a lot of stuff about it and around it, and also because it's always very much set in and around South Shields. Ray's asked for it to be set around the building of the first town hall, which is that little
in the marketplace.
In the marketplace, there's that clock just outside the word. Yeah. And so I've had to go back to what that looked like and draw the original sort of scenes and the Cooksonville Glassworks and the Cooksonville Mill. And I've had to go back to the original picture. I've done quite a bit of research. I've enjoyed it.
Right. Great. Brilliant. Well, at least you're only playing one part this time.
Oh, yes, I am. Yeah. That's it. I'm done with all that multi-change chaos. Yeah, much easier.
Well, again, if you're watching this in 2024 or even 2025, because I'm sure after this year you'll be invited back again, you could do a lot worse than go to the Pantomime at the Customs House and see Alfie and many other people.
Please do.
And let's see where you pop up next.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Terry.
Alfie,
I've enjoyed it.
Pleasure.
Lovely.
Thanks for joining us.
They're a beating on me.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. Do join us again for another edition of Northern Spotlights, where I'll be meeting another inspiring guest.